Welcome everyone to our session with Heather Carpenter, who is coming to us from Louisiana State University, where she's the executive director of the Institute for Nonprofit Administration and Research. And Heather and I have been working in the nonprofit space parallel for quite some time, and I'm super excited that she has broadened her scope to help us learn how to lead courageously whoever we are. And I'm just so excited to be able to share this opportunity to learn with Heather. Heather, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. You can hear me all right? Good.
Yes.
Welcome. Good morning. I can't tell you how grateful I am to be with you today. I see leaders, I see change makers. I see people who are pouring their hearts and their energy into causes that matter and into communities that need you. And that inspires me. But I want to begin with something very human, a question. How many of you have ever felt like you weren't enough? Not just as a professional, but as a leader. How many of you have looked at expectations around you, the idea of what a real leader looks like, and felt like you didn't measure up? If you felt that, you are not alone. I know that feeling all too well. For years, I believed if I just did enough, worked hard enough, achieved enough, I'd finally be accepted. I thought belonging was something I could earn through effort, and that if I checked enough boxes, the degrees, the publications, the programs built, the grants secured, that I'd be invited to sit at the table. But achievement wasn't enough. The truth is, our world doesn't reward results. It rewards conformity to hidden rules. It rewards a certain way of speaking, a certain way of leading, a certain way of showing up. And for those of us that don't naturally fit those molds, belonging feels out of reach. I've been told I'm too direct, too intense, too emotional, too sensitive, too much, and for years I believed those critiques. I thought they meant I was failing as a leader. But what I eventually learned is the very things I thought were flaws were actually my greatest strengths. And I suspect the same might be true for you. That's why I want to take you on a journey today, not just through leadership theories, not just through management frameworks, but through lived experience, my story, stories from the nonprofit sector, stories of neurodiverse leaders, stories of how we can rethink leadership, what it looks like when we stop asking people to fit into molds that were never made for them in the first place. Because leadership at its best is not about performing strength, it's about showing up whole. So the cost of trying to fit into the leadership mold. For me, the cost was burnout. I thought leadership meant controlling everything, having the right answer to every question, maintaining composure no matter what, and working until I collapsed to prove my worth. I remember years when my weeks felt like a treadmill that never stopped. Mondays, I was optimistic. Tuesdays, I was overbooked. And Wednesday, I was exhausted. By Thursday, I was numb. And Friday, I was questioning everything. The weekends weren't rest. They were catching up on grading, catching up on emails, catching up on housework, catching up on being a parent. I was performing leadership at the cost of my health, my family, and my soul. And maybe you felt that too. The cost of exhaustion, the cycle of exhaustion that comes from trying to live up to a standard that was never designed with you in mind. So I want you to pause for a moment. And I want you to think about this or grab a pen or just take a breath. What's one expectation of leadership that you've struggled to meet? Where have you felt pressure to be someone you're not, just to be accepted as a leader? Hold that thought because it matters, and we'll come back to it. There's a paradox I've lived with my entire life. My craving for freedom and my craving for control. On one hand, I resist control. I want I don't want others to define me. I don't want society to box me in. I don't want people to tell me how to dress, how to act, how to lead. But yet I crave control. I crave control over my own environment. I want to structure my schedule. I want to define my work. I want to control outcomes, processes, even the way others see me. It's a strange push and pull, and I've come to see it as deeply connected to leadership. Leaders crave freedom, freedom to innovate, freedom to create, freedom to chart a new course. But leaders also crave control, control over outcomes, control over systems, control over performance. This paradox can make us feel stuck. There are days when I want to be bold, try to wear bright colors, to dye my hair red, to show up fully as myself. And by the way, I did try it once. I dyed my hair red. It turned orange. So the whole time after I did that, I was thinking, what do people think? Did I look professional? Would I be judged? Would I be taken seriously? It's a silly story, but it points to something deeper. The advice we're constantly given, be yourself, be confident, don't care what others think. It's easier said than done because the truth is what people think does matter. It matters in leadership. Perception shapes credibility. Credibility shapes influence. So we walk the line, and the result is often exhaustion. So let's look at professionalism. For over 2 decades, I've been navigating the slippery, shifting idea of professionalism. When I started my career, I was often told I looked too young to be taken seriously. I can't tell you how many times I walked into a boardroom and saw the subtle flicker in someone's eyes, the question of whether or not I was qualified to be there. It doesn't matter that I had the training, the skills, or the experience. Professionalism, in their eyes, wasn't about competence, it was about appearance, age, and projection. And here's the thing, professionalism has never been a fixed standard. It's a moving target, shaped by generational norms, cultural assumptions, and personal biases. For some, professionalism means a suit and tie. For others, it means flexibility and informality. For some, professionalism means long hours at the office. For others, it means results no matter what or where and when the work gets done. So, what is professionalism really? So, I would argue professionalism is not about appearance or conformity. It's about competence, respect, and result. But even those words, competent, respect, results, are filtered through bias. Men are often praised for being fathers. Women are penalized for being mothers. This is a real motherhood penalty. Research shows women are judged as less committed to work after having children, while fathers are often judged as being more dependable. And let's look at resume and interviews. The supposed gatekeepers of professionalism are notoriously poor predictors of actual job performance. Too often, people are hired not for competence, but for who they know. Networks outweigh skill. And generational differences complicate things further. A baby boomer may think posting personal reflections online is unprofessional, but a millennial or Gen Z professional may see it as authentic connection. Neither is wrong, but both reveal how subjective professionalism really is. Professionalism then is not about whether you wear a blazer or a cardigan. It's not about whether you speak in a polished tone or a passionate one. It's about whether you bring competence, respect, and contribution to the table. And yet, how often do we judge others consciously or unconsciously by their conformity to outdated standards? How often have we judged ourselves by those same standards? So I want to tell you a personal story. I asked one of my coworkers, and I said, I keep getting comments that I'm too young. People say literally that I'm too young. I said, I can't change my age. And she said to me, Heather, you're smart, But if you want to be taken seriously, you need to dress more professionally. And I remember going home that night and staring at my closet. On one hand, I understood the advice, conform, and I'd have more credibility. On the other hand, something in me broke a little because it wasn't about my competence. So, but years later, my closet is full of black and white clothes. As you can see, I'm wearing all black today. Well, I'm black and white skirt because I'm still concerned about looking too young to be taken seriously. However, comments about my age weren't about my ability to lead. It was about fitting into an image that didn't feel like me. How many of us have been told similar things? Don't be too emotional. Don't be too quiet. Don't be too bold. Don't wear that. Don't say that. So much of our world is built on don'ts. But the deeper question is, what are we losing when we reduce professionalism to conformity? What voices, perspectives, and innovations are we silencing when we judge based on appearance instead of contribution? So, professionalism in 2025 and beyond has to be evolved. It has to be about, it can't be about whether or not you work 9 to 5 at a desk. It can't be about whether or not you wear a suit or jeans. It can't be about whether or not you communicate face to face or by text. Professionalism has to be about competence. Are you doing the work well? Respect. Are you treating others with dignity? Connection. Are you building trust and collaboration? And connections. Are you, yes, I said that already. Are you treating others with dignity and are you building trust and collaboration? That's it. Everything else is noise. And yet, how many of us are still carrying the weight of trying to live up to outdated standards? So, the weight of knowledge. Some days, here's a confession I have for you. Some days I really wish I didn't know so much. After 20 years of the study and practice of leadership and management, I know what good leadership looks like. I know what makes an effective manager. I know what creates a strong organization, but knowledge doesn't always translate into action. The reality is most managers are promoted without proper training. They excel at their individual jobs, maybe fundraising, program delivery, and then suddenly they're managing people and they don't know how. As someone who does know how, I often see the gaps, the things that could be so much better if only people had the right tools, the system that could function smoothly with just a few adjustments, the cultures that could be healthier with just a little bit more support. It can be frustrating. Sometimes I wonder if ignorance would be easier, but I can't unknow what I know. And with knowledge comes responsibility, the responsibility to teach, to consult, to equip, to advocate for better leadership practices. Yes, the gap between theory and practice is wide, but that's why exactly why I keep doing this work, because the more we close the gap, the stronger our organizations and our communities become. So let's briefly talk about these leadership and management concepts, and hopefully I won't bore you too much, but it's important to know the context for what is going on and where people's perspectives come from. And some of you, I think, are in the MBA program at Olivet, right? So you're probably learning a lot of these theories, as I have a master's in management and a PhD in leadership. So for more than 20 years, as I've studied and practiced these management theories and leadership theories in nonprofits and communities, I've learned that theories matter. They give us language, they give us models, but they were never designed with leaders like me in mind. So let's start from the beginning with the classic management and leadership theories. So hopefully some of you are familiar with these already. In the late 19th and 20th centuries, as organizations grew more complex, scholars began developing what we call as classical management theories. Frederick Taylor's scientific management focused on efficiency, breaking the work down into tasks, standardized processes, motivate workers with pay. Taylor believed there was one best way to do every job. And this approach, it transformed factories, right? But here's the problem. It treated people like machines. And in the organizations that I study, the nonprofits where work is fueled by passion, treating people like interchangeable cogs in machines can crush morale. Then we move on to Max Weber's bureaucratic management, which emphasized structure, clear hierarchies, rules, procedures, and in many university institutional settings, that's bureaucracy it's the same. In theory, it brings fairness and consistency, but in practice, we know bureaucracy often means red tape, rigidity, and resistance to innovation and change. Then we have Henry Fayol's administrative theories, which gave us the 5 functions of management, which we teach in management classes and degree programs: planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, and controlling. He also identified 14 principles of management, like division of work, unity of command, and esprit de corps. We have trait theory and leadership, which is also known as the great man theory. I'm not kidding you. Which says that leaders are born and not made, and it's based on traits, how someone looks. Many of these ideas remain relevant today, but again, they were developed in industrial contexts, not modern day organizations. They were designed for predictable, stable environments, and now work in environments of scarcity and change. Moving on to the mid-20th century, we have the behavioral management theories, where researchers began to recognize that people aren't just productivity units, they're human beings with emotions, motivations, and need. Human relations theories, also known as Hawthorne studies, showed that productivity wasn't just about lighting or pay, it was about social factors. When workers felt seen, morale improved, productivity increased. Douglas McGregor's theory X and Y offered 2 competing assumptions. Theory X assumes employees dislike work, while theory Y assumes employees are self-motivated. Organizations often live in the tensions with these assumptions. We believe in our people's passion in nonprofit organization, but often funding models, reporting requirements, and stress can push leaders into micromanagement and focus more on theory X. Maybe you've probably heard of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which proposed that humans are motivated by different levels, such as psychological level, safety, belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. So we often operate at the top levels of self-actualization, but in reality, if people are not addressing their lower level needs of psychological safety, belonging, they can't operate at the higher levels. So then we have equity theory, which reminds us employees compare their inputs and outputs to others. If I'm working harder but not rewarded fairly, resentment builds. Expectancy theory says motivation depends on whether efforts lead to performance and performance to results. Hopefully you're not too bored yet, but just a couple more theories. Leader management exchange theory focuses on the relationship between the leader and team member. It suggests that leaders form in-groups and out-groups of different trust levels. So these theories are crucial in organizational settings. And I want to go briefly over the modern and contemporary theories. So systems theories views organizations as interconnected systems where change is one part of the whole. Contingency theory argues there's no one single best way to lead. Effectiveness depends on the situation. Life cycle theory suggests leadership and management styles should change as organizations or team matures. Democratic leadership involves team members in decision-making while still guiding the process. Participatory leadership emphasizes shared involvement and collaboration in setting goals and solving problems. Total quality management, I don't know, maybe you've studied this, and this came over from Japan, focuses on continuous improvement, customer satisfaction, employee involvement. Transactional and transformational leadership, which I just taught my students about this week in their class, transactional leadership relies on structured rewards and punishments to motivate performance. Transformational leadership inspires and motivates people through vision, values, and innovation. And servant leadership, which is very popular in nonprofits, prioritizes serving others, emphasizing empathy, ethics, and community building. All right, I'm on to the last column here. Stay awake. You can stay awake. We're almost to the next point. So agile management uses flexible, iterative approaches to adapt quickly to change and improve outcomes. Authentic leadership builds trust through self-awareness, transparency, and consistency with values. Inclusive leadership creates environments where diverse perspectives are welcome, respected, and valued. And we've got shared leadership distributes leadership roles among team members rather than relying on one individual. Intersectionality examines how overlapping identities such as gender, race, and disability shape the experience of leadership and inequality. Social role theory explains cultural expectations of gender roles influence perception of leaders, and situational leadership, which is one of my favorites, with Ken Blanchard, developed adjusts leadership style, directing, coaching, supporting, delegating based on the readiness of the team and the individual. And radical transformational leadership, which is very recent, comes out of the nonprofit NGO space, seeks deep systemic change by challenging power structures and centering justice and equity. All right, whew, we made it through this. All right, so then we've got emotional intelligence. Everyone loves emotional intelligence. If you look at most job descriptions, God must be emotionally intelligent. So for the past 30 years, Daniel Goldman, his emotional intelligence model has been celebrated as the secret to leadership success. Self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, social skills. So self-awareness is recognize our own emotions, strengths, weaknesses, values, and their impact on other. Self-regulations is managing emotions in healthy ways, staying calm, thinking before acting, maintaining control. And motivation is being driven to achieve for the sake of achievement, not just external rewards. Empathy is understanding emotions and perspectives of others, and social skills is managing relations through effective communication, conflict resolution, and collaboration. These sound great, right? Awesome. Yes, these are important, but emotional intelligence is often taught and assumed there's one way of processing emotions, one way of communicating, one way of relating. What about those of us that feel too much empathy, who experience hyper-empathy, where other people's pain overwhelms us? What about those of us that communicate directly, without small talk or sugarcoating? In some contexts, that's seen as blunt or abrasive or rude, but in reality, it's honest. What about those of us that can't easily suppress emotions, who cry when frustrated or raise our voices like this? Seeing as people might think I'm yelling, but it's really, I'm just passionate, right? Traditional emotional intelligence says we lack self-regulation. But what if the expectation is wrong? Maybe the problem isn't us. Maybe the model is too narrow. So where do I fit? I've already told you this, that I feel emotions deeply. I've studied all these theories. I've taught them to students. I've applied them and consulted. But yet none of them fully describe me because I'm autistic. I have ADHD. I have anxiety. So traditional theories reward composure, control, conformity. They weren't designed for leaders like me. So those of us that are autistic, ADHD, we make up 10 to 13% of the population. And for me, leadership is not about influence. It's about empathy. It's about holding space for emotions and mental health. It's supporting people as individuals, not forcing them into a mold. If someone does their work well, let them do it in a way that works for them. Leadership is not about sameness. It's about embracing difference to thrive. And for me, this is also about faith. The Bible is full of raw emotions. Job cries out in despair. Jeremiah laments. The Psalms include rage, sorrow, joy, and praise. Even Jesus cried out on the cross. And God never rebukes them for their honesty. Job's friends try to silence him, but God later rebuked the friends, not Job, for misrepresenting him. David danced before the Lord with abandon, and others thought him undignified, but God honored his worship. Scripture validates lament, grief, anger, and joy. It does not teach suppression. It teaches authentic expression guided by wisdom. So why should leadership demand emotional suppression. So I'm defining neurodiverse leadership, although I'm not the first person to do this, but I begin to articulate a new definition. It still includes influence, but it also includes empathy, includes holding space for emotions and mental health. It values people as they are, not as who theories say they should be. So like I said, if your work is strong, I don't care if you do it in the morning or at midnight. I don't care if you need noise canceling headphones or frequent breaks. I don't care if you communicate in writing instead of in person. Do the work your way. Because leadership is not about forcing sameness, it's about enabling difference. So just let's talk about more about the strengths that leadership in autistic individuals bring and ADHD. I'm doing research on this fall about leadership in organizations. And so the hyper-focus in autistic and ADHD individuals and neurodiverse individuals allow us to dig deeply into complex problems. Creativity that fuels innovation in programming and fundraising, empathy that allows us to connect profoundly with clients and communities, passion that sustains us through long hours and limited resources. I would not be where I'm at today if it wasn't for my autism and my passion for studying and teaching and doing this work. But their challenges are just as real. Masking often is an exhausting effort to appear normal in neurotypical environments. There are hidden rules, unwritten expectations about behavior, speech, or appearance that we never learned and that we end up punished, but we are punished for breaking. There's often sensory overload in chaotic workplaces and bias. We're being labeled as too much or not enough no matter what we do. We're constantly navigating structures that were never designed with us in mind, and yet we are reshaping leadership in the process. Our leadership is often transformational, not because we fit the mold, but because we challenge it. We build organizations that are flexible, more empathetic, and more inclusive. We create cultures where people are judged by our contributions, not their conformity. I don't have time to talk about Star Trek right now, but I will if I get time at the end, or I can tell you the story some other time. But I encourage you to look up Vulcans and maybe you can understand what I'm saying. So there's this double standard of assertiveness. So let's be honest, being misunderstood often comes at a cost. In many workplaces, the same behavior is interpreted differently depending on who's doing it. When some people are quiet, they're seen as dependable, but not leadership material. When these same people speak up assertively, they're labeled as aggressive or difficult. Meanwhile, when others display the exact same behavior, they're praised as confident, visionary, or strong leaders. There's a double standard of assertiveness. It's not limited to gender, though gender plays a huge role. It applies to race, ethnicity, neurodiversity, and any identity that falls out those traditional molds of leadership and management that I showed you a few slides ago. This isn't about finger pointing, it's about recognizing unconscious bias. If we want workplaces to truly value equity, we need to pause and ask ourselves, am I judging the message or the messenger? Do I unconsciously reward some people for some behaviors that I penalize in others? How can I create spaces for different communication styles to be seen as strengths? Because leadership comes as many forms, and when we fail to recognize that, we shut people out. Not because they lack ability, but because they don't look like or sound like what we've been taught to expect. So for so much of my life, I believed the message that I didn't need to change, that I did need to change, excuse me, that I needed to be more confident, that I needed to stop apologizing, fit the mold, don't be emotional. I thought if I could fix myself, those parts of myself, I'd finally belong. But what I've learned is that the constant drive to fix myself has come at a cost. Mental health distress, feelings of inadequacy, and lingering shame about simply being who I am. That's why I began practicing what I call radical acceptance. Radical acceptance means embracing myself and others as we are without judgment, without resistance. And this means everyone. Okay? Everyone. It doesn't mean giving up. It doesn't mean refusing to grow. It means saying, this is who I am right now, and that's enough. It's about expanding the same grace to other. Society tells us to strive constantly for self-improvement, to toughen up, to always push to be better. But sometimes what people need the most is to not demand to change, but permission to be. When we embrace radical acceptance, we create space for connection and healing. Imagine workplaces built on radical acceptance, where difference is not a threat, but a gift, where authenticity is not punished, but celebrated, where leaders model compassion and not conformity. This isn't a weakness, it's a strength, because when people feel accepted, they thrive. So let me ask you, where do you need to practice radical acceptance in your own leadership? Is it how you view yourself? Is it how you view your team? Is it how you view professionalism, communication, or productivity? Because here's the truth, you are not a machine. Your team is not a machine. We are human beings with emotions, griefs, with quirks, with passions. And leadership at its best is about creating spaces where humanity is not just allowed, but embraced. Now, the first speaker went over in time, and I don't want to go over in time. I have a whole nother section because I've timed my presentation to be 38 minutes, but I want to be respectful. My next part is about building empathetic workplaces, but I want to talk to Kelly first and see if I should just stop right now. So you'll now have time for the next speaker.
Heather, I would say it's super interesting, and I really want us to get to those pieces for folks so that they get the wrap up. And so yeah, so I would say go ahead and do
Okay,
that
I'll
next.
try to do it as quickly as I can, but
Yes.
just note the next speaker.
Okay, I will let Brenda know.
All right, thank you. All right. Okay. So in closing, my last part is about how to build empathetic workplaces. All right. So it plays a central role in leadership, team collaboration, and conflict resolution, diversity, and inclusion, and overall workplace culture. But however, most workplaces lack compassion. I've seen staff burn out because their supervisors didn't acknowledge limits. I've seen organizations celebrate resilience while ignoring the costs. I've seen leaders push their teams past the breaking point in the name of the mission. But here's the truth, our missions cannot thrive if our people are withering. Building empathetic workplace isn't soft, it's strategic. It's the foundation of retention, sustainability, and impact. So how do we do it? We normalize and conversations about well-being. Often leaders don't know that they're setting the tone at the top, right? This is in, if you read the book, Highly Effective People, and it's the tone at the top. When we often talk about stress, boundaries, and mental health, we signal that it's safe for others to be honest too. Silence breeds stigma. With creating psychological safety means people can ask questions and make mistakes and share new ideas without fear of humiliation or punishment. It's a game changer for neurodiverse employees and reality for everyone. And building flexibility, flexible schedules, remote work options, quiet spaces can make the difference between employees thriving or quitting. Small adjustments remove huge barriers. And training managers. As I said, most managers, research shows that most managers are not, that when they're promoted to management, they don't have the proper leadership or management training. We assume they'll figure it out, but supervision is a skill. Training managers in empathetic communication, conflict resolution, and spotting burnout is essential. And encourage regular check-ins, not just performance reviews. How are you doing? What's working? What's not? When we ask with certainty and listen with care, trust grows. And celebrate strengths and differences. Stop asking people to fit in. Start asking how to leverage their unique strengths. Maybe it's pattern recognition or creative problem solving. When we put people over our products, our services, and I often tell a nonprofit organization, let's treat our employees and volunteers like we do our clients. We put so much effort into our clients. Let's treat our employees the same. So these steps aren't rocket science or basic leadership, but they require intention, and they require the leaders to choose empathy over ego. So one of the hardest truths I've witnessed is what happens when someone discloses a mental health challenge or disability at work. You would think disclosure would open the door to support, that it would lead to understanding, that it would deepen partnership, but too often it does the opposite. I've seen organizations respond with vague, delayed, or shifting communication. I've seen leaders quietly label employees as difficult or high maintenance. I've seen requests for accommodations treated as threats rather than opportunities. And when the employee eventually breaks down, cry in frustration, or raise their voice in exhaustion, it's written off as insubordination instead of human reaction to being unheard or misunderstood. Even worse, I've seen organizations go into fight mode instead of asking, how can we help? How can we, instead they ask, how can we protect ourselves? They worry about liability, about image, about control. And sometimes they punish the very person who asked for help. All this is rooted in the false belief that people should perform like machines, that fairness means sameness, that individually is a threat. But we are not machines. We are human beings, each with their own needs, rhythms, and limits. Honoring those differences is not a burden. It's how organizations build trust. It's how they retain talent. It's how they value their lives. If you've experienced this, if you've disclosed and been met with silence or resistance, you are not alone. If you're in leadership or HR, hear me clearly. When someone discloses, they are not attacking you. They're inviting you to build a better system. It's time to stop punishing people for their needs and start creating workplaces where asking for support is met with empathy, not defense. So in closing, at my university's kickoff event this year, the speaker said something that stopped me in my tracks. He described himself as a system, that all aspects of who he is, personal and professional, shape how he makes decisions and how he leads. Hearing that was both a relief and a challenge to me. A relief because I've longed for permission to show up fully as myself. A challenge because in practice, it often doesn't feel safe. Like many of you, I've been taught to compartmentalize, keep the personal at home, show only the professional at work. But here's the truth. My whole self is a little messy. I am emotional. I am passionate. Sometimes people perceive me differently than I intend. That makes me hesitate. And yet our lived experiences, the grief, the struggles, the quirks, they're not weaknesses, they're contexts, they're soil from what empathy grows. So I'll leave you with a few practical strategies, not theory, but tangible things that you can do as leaders. You can read these on the screen. And I'll just say that really lead with authenticity. For years, I believed belonging was earned by achievement. If I worked hard enough, published enough, built enough programs, that I would finally belong. But belonging doesn't work that way. Belonging isn't earned, it's given. Belonging is cultivated in community. It happens when we stop asking people to fit the mold and start welcoming them as they are. I stand here not as a flawless academic or an unshakable leader. I stand here as a whole person, or sit here. I sit here as a mom, a daughter, a spouse, a woman who is broken and healed and broken again, a pracademic who lives at the margins of community academy. I've come to accept that I may never fit into one space, and maybe that's the point. I'm not here to fit. I'm here to bridge, to question, to build, to lead, and so are you. So my challenge to you is lead with authenticity. Give yourself grace you give to others. Build workplaces that honor humanity and productivity. And if you've ever felt like you're too much or not enough, I want you to hear me. You are not alone. You are not broken, and your belonging isn't something you have to earn. It's something you already deserve. Thank you, and I apologize for going over for the next speaker.
Heather, oh my gosh, how can you see inside my soul? This was fantastic. Absolutely wonderful information for people who have to navigate life and they see it differently and do it differently. Thank you so much. I love the point you made. They're not weaknesses, they're context. And that's something that everyone needs to understand is we have to be very sensitive to and understanding of context. Thank you for sharing that great perspective with us. I would open it up for questions, but we're going to continue rolling. We do have our leadership learning community discussion forums, and there is one for Heather's topic. Please jump into that Canvas room, our leadership learning community, and write down questions for Heather, share your feedback, and I can forward things on and we can continue this conversation. It's an important conversation and it's something that definitely needs to be elevated. And I'm just so excited, Heather, that you have broadened your platform to include this really important message. Thank you so much
Thanks for
to
having me.
you, and I hope that we have opportunities to get together and work together in person one of these
Yeah.
days.
Thank you
And
very much. Okay.